it's time to say goodbye, Betty. Been so nice traveling with you.
Thank you, Irene. I was so excited and nervous. It's sure great to have you to talk to.
Remember, I'll be watching for you on the big screen.
Okay, Irene. Won't that be the day?
Good luck, Betty dear. Take care of yourself and be careful.
I will. Thanks again.
Betty, it was so nice meeting you. All the luck in the world.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. My bags.
Where to?
1612 Havenhurst.
Got it.
Hello there, and welcome. Apologies, I've got a slightly more dishevelled appearance than usual just because I just had to pop out for a pint of milk for my cup of tea, and it's absolutely pissing it down. But as many of you know, wizards, like myself, we do not wear raincoats, nor indeed do we use umbrellas, so we are left to the elements and have to fare as well as we may. Yes. Anyway, at the beginning of this video, there should have been a small clip there from David Lynch's 2001 film Mulholland Drive, a kind of surreal mystery about Hollywood. This is an absolutely fantastic film, but for me, this clip at the beginning has always stuck in my mind because it encapsulates both the mythical allure of Hollywood as well as the potentially seedy and sinister underbelly. So Naomi Watts there playing the character Betty Elms, a young aspiring actress. We see her first arriving in Hollywood, full of that glow of expectation and potential. We've also got that very odd old couple that later in the limo there look particularly scary. Of course, this is just a kind of form of symbolism at this point, and it doesn't really bear too heavily on the book I'm about to talk about, but I thought I'd stick it in there anyway. But Coldheart Canyon does deal with some of these themes as well as many others, but within the guise of a fairly far-fetched and at times grotesque and unpleasant form of horror fantasy, I should say. Now, I should say from the get-go that I am quite a big fan of Clive Barker's work, so the books of Blood, Weave World, Imagica, all absolutely wonderful. Some of the stuff I've read of his, though, hasn't quite hit the mark. The Damnation Game, The Great and Secret Show, The Scarlet Gospels. Absolutely awful. So where will Coldheart Canyon place within those two groups? Will it grab me by the short and curlies, or will it leave me, literally, with a cold heart? Right, here it is. So, this is the copy of the book I've read. I've only read 3 books so far this year, and that's largely because of this big bastard of a book here, weighing in at a sizable 751 pages. It was purchased last year by my brother, Mark the Blade, up in London, for the princely sum of £14.99. I mean, I tend to buy used books mostly, so the price of this shocked me, actually. I mean, you're getting bang for your buck here in terms of parchment, but otherwise, that's quite expensive, isn't it? But anyway, before we begin, oh, there's the cover there. I'll pop it up there. Come on, let's not get too hasty. Before we go any further, I'm going to take a quick sniff. I mean, this is a relatively new book, so it probably won't be very ripe, but we'll have a little go. Excuse me. Oh, yes. Freshly planed wood. Yes, we've got wood there straight off. And yes, it's lingering. We've still got that new parchment smell, if you will, which always reminds me of the paper that used to be wrapped, that fish and chips used to be wrapped up in. So quite delicious, in fact. But there we are. So yeah, this is this current cover, but later on I'm going to pop up lots of other ones. So over in Britain and over in America, there haven't been too many variations on the cover, but I will show the ones I've found, as well as some interesting international ones. But my question at this point would be, which cover do you prefer? My personal favourite, which will pop up a bit later, is the one that features Clive Barker's chiselled and handsome face on the cover, looking suitably suave and also slightly dodgy. But there we are. Right, let's get down to the business at hand. The book begins in the 1920s over in Romania, of all places. So there's a famous silent film star from Hollywood, Katja Lupi she's called, and she's going back to Romania to visit some relatives. Going with her is her friend and hopeful suitor, Willem Zephyr. And so while she's visiting relatives, he bimbles around the town and comes across this great big imposing monastery. He gets talking to one of the monks, who happens to be an alcoholic, and through their discussions, he finds out that there's something quite special down in the basement of this monastery. So he's looking for things to buy, basically. Curiosities, things that he thinks might please his mistress, this Katja Lupi. And so anyway, the monk shows him to this room that's decked out in painted tiles, ceramic tiles. And they cover the walls, the ceiling and the floor. And it has a really interesting piece of artwork. The assemblage is quite incredible. So it's kind of like a Hieronymus Bosch painting, a sadomasochistic version, one might say. So it looks quite beautiful in some ways. There's a wonderful landscape, but there's also depictions of murder and torture and various erotic stuff going on. Instantly, Zephyr becomes really excited and he persuades the monk to sell it to him. So, I mean, this thing is vast. I mean, it's thousands of these tiles. So he purchases this in one piece and gets all of the tiles cut out of the wall and shipped back to where they live in Hollywood. That's the beginning. Now, I started this book with some trepidation because I thought, Christ, it's going to take me at least a month to get through this, which it did. So I thought, should I read it? That first little chapter really got me. It really won me over. It was so beautifully written, and the idea of this mosaic, this strange depiction of what appeared to be hell, perhaps, was so intriguing. I just kept reading. So then the rest of the story, the lion's share, by, I don't know, 90%, 95% of it, is set within the contemporary setting of when Clive Barker wrote this. So it'd be the beginning of this new millennium, perhaps the late 90s, I'm not quite sure. And here there's two main characters really that we follow. So there's Todd Pickett for one, who's the one that runs all the way through it. And so he's a famous Hollywood actor whose career is slightly on the slide now. So he's known for his chiseled good looks more than his acting really. And his looks are starting to fail him slightly. And so he takes the dubious, he makes a dubious decision to consult a plastic surgeon to, give him a bit of a nip and a tuck. Unfortunately, this goes horribly wrong and he's left disfigured. So his agent kind of panics and whisks him away to this remote little mansion hidden in the Hollywood Hills in Coldheart Canyon. And there he's going to convalesce and hopefully come out the other side with his face not as bad as he thinks it's going to be, I suppose. Now, who does he meet in this otherwise abandoned and overgrown garden mansion but Katja Lupi, the same girl or same young woman we heard of at the beginning of the story back in the 1920s, and she hasn't aged a day since that time. Ooh, mysterious. So yes, the only other character of note I would say, really, without going too far into this, is a young woman called Tammy Lauper. Now she's a plus-size woman, I suppose you would say in today's vernacular. And she is a kind of obsessed fan of Todd Pickett, and she runs the fan club for him. So anyway, at the beginning, she becomes suspicious of why he's disappeared off the radar. And so she's so obsessed that she tracks him down to this very place and becomes enmeshed within these convoluted things that are going on at this mansion. Very, very, very far-fetched, I must say. Now, I won't go too far into what happens. I would need a few hours probably to talk about that. But I would say one thing, and it's, I suppose, a slight spoiler, but I won't go into details. But basically, it appears to be that the translation of these tiles from Romania to the mansion in Hollywood has caused it to have a new life, so to speak. So back in Romania where it was installed, there were certain tiles that were incorrectly aligned, for example. And so when Willem Zephyr had it translated, it was done perfectly. And I think it unlocks some kind of magical power. And so this isn't merely a room with an intriguing thing to look at. It's become almost a portal to another world. So it functions almost as like a holodeck, I suppose, in Star Trek. It's the amalgamation of all of these different tiles. It's no longer just an illustration, but you're actually inhabiting it. So there's movement there. These various couplings, sadistic things going on. You're seeing it actually moving. You can interact with it. There are people in there moving around. Absolutely wonderful. It's called the Devil's Country. So, yeah, I don't know how much to talk about this, but one little piece of lore I will give you is that it was reputedly created by one of the devil's wives, Lilith. But anyway, I won't go into that. But anyway, the Devil's Country. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So anyway, let's get down to the nuts and bolts of, firstly, what I liked about this book. Now, it has to be said that Clive Barker's writing here is him at his best. I mean, it's so wonderfully written. It wasn't just the power of that idea at the very beginning of the book that made me want to read on. It's just the way he writes. It's delicious, delectable even. And it just kept spurring me on. I mean, I'm not a quick reader. I don't read very quickly at all. It took me a month. I told you that already. But every time I went to bed in the evening, it's the only time I really read. Instead of fucking around on my phone, which I normally do before picking up the book, I was straight on it. So it's the writing more than anything that was weaving a spell upon me, if you will. There's also the power of Clive Barker's imagination. So we encounter various things within this, not just within the Devil's Country, that depiction of hell, but also there are these very strange hybrid ghost monsters that we encounter that are very interestingly engineered, shall we say. At the same time, that was an aspect of the book I wasn't really that interested in. We'll talk about that in a bit. But that doesn't take anything away from the power of his imagination. The more arcane and the more devilish stuff, you can tell he's really getting in there, and his mind is just sparking all over the place, and we are reaping the benefits of that kind of explosion going on. There's also a fair bit of erotic stuff in this. So this often creeps up in Clive Barker books. It was in Imagica. There was a sizable amount of that. And I do like a bit of that, I must say. I'm a sexual wizard after all. But it's not the kind of erotica that kind of gets you hot under the cover. It's kind of beautiful in a way, despite the fact that a lot of the stuff that's going on here is quite sordid. Now, the last thing I'll talk about that I really loved about this book is something I've already waxed lyrically upon, and that is the Devil's Country, this room of tiles. It was just such a wonderful idea. as well as the kind of historical aspect of it. You know, where has it come from? I mean, this thing is actually really old. It's like 400 years old. And then the idea of it being dismantled in this far-flung country, this Eastern European country, and then translated into this mansion over in Hollywood. Oh, I loved it. But and then the ability of Clive Barker to describe this and to fill it with his quite sordid imagination was also a wonderful thing to experience. You can see him loving specifically this idea and this room. And so for me, this is the very top of it. It's the pinnacle. It's the shining supernova of the whole thing. The rest of it is completely dimmed by the power of this idea. But anyway, let's get to what I didn't like, because there's quite a bit to get through. So, as I said at the beginning, it's a very large book. It didn't need to be this large. In fact, so the power of this idea of the Devil's Country, it could have functioned brilliantly as a short story. I could see in Clive Barker's mind, this idea definitely has legs for a larger novel. But it wasn't this one. It went off all over the place, and not in a direction that I found at all interesting. I read through the whole thing just because I love his writing, and I wanted to find out what was going to happen in terms of this room and its effect on other things going on. But aside from that, it was a bit tedious, but a delightful tediousness, if you will. I mean, really, what this book needed was a damn good edit, really. It seems as though perhaps this project just got out of hand. It became so convoluted and so bloated that it was very hard to bring it back into something that was readable, pleasant to read, and that had momentum. As soon as Todd Pickett arrived on the scene, it started grinding to a halt, really, for me. There were whole chapters that I would have just jettisoned if I had anything to do with it. I'm not saying I know better than, it's just that there was a chapter there about his pet dog. That could have just fucked off easily, and nothing would have, except the very end, there's a reference to the dog. But perhaps also relating to this idea that it needed editing, it needed, pulling back a bit. There were obvious inconsistencies as well, that's a major put off to me. There was one thing, it was to do with an appointment he made for the plastic surgeon, and it was related to the dog, and it was like the dog had died, but then there was a weird confliction there, and I had to reread a couple of pages. I did it twice because I thought, what the hell's happened here? And it completely ruined that path. The reason that he had postponed going to the plastic surgeon was because of his dog. But then when he did go there, there was nothing to do with the dog. It was very odd. And there were a couple of other things as well that didn't seem quite right. I didn't like that one little bit. Right, another thing is a cringy dialogue and just cringiness in general. So I'm afraid Clive Barker, occasionally he does this. So some of the dialogue was just awful, really, really awful. People don't talk that way. Perhaps it's kind of trying to ape the style of the kind of movies that Todd Pickett's in, those kind of one-liners and crap like that. But I don't think so. I really don't know why these characters were talking the way they were at times. Very off-putting. The other thing that was a bit cringy for me, I suppose, was because it's set in Hollywood and it's about the movie industry, there are mentions of various other actors. And like a party, and there'll be an agent of so-and-so. There'll be an actual, as Arnie is mentioned at one point, Nicole Kidman, things like that. I don't know what it is, but when it's a work of fiction and these real people are brought into what is actually a quite bonkers and fantastical form of horror, it does something weird to me that makes me cringe. I don't know what that is. I think it's probably because it's breaking some kind of rule in terms of believability. You can believe a lot about a universe that doesn't actually exist. But as soon as you start bringing parts into it that we know, it's like, fuck off, that kind of thing. I don't like it. But anyway, there we are. The only other thing I would say is based, going back again on the fact that it's not been edited very well. This goes in all different directions, as though lots of different ideas were being played out, but there was no real coherency other than the idea of the devil's country, this room. That was the only focal point of the whole thing, and everything else just pissed around the periphery, and eventually one sperm made it in there, metaphorically, and the book ended. But it could have been so much better, I think. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, bloody hell, I'm sorry. I'm out of practice doing these reviews. Let's bring him down and give him a damn good thrashing. So I've decided to give this 3 stars out of 5. Yeah. So despite the balance of what I've said about this book is negative, it has to be said that I loved the imagination and the way it was written, and the Devil's Country, specifically that part of the story. But I did resent having to wade through 751 pages to get what I liked out of it. It was kind of like a pick and mix, and most of it was horrible old tough licorice, and there were little morsels of something, dolly mixtures, for example. I used to like those as a child. You had to fish out those little morsels. Anyway, there we are. 3 out of 5. Not terrible. If you're a fan of Clive Barker, you'll probably enjoy it, as I did. But if you're not, you're in for a rough ride, I would say. Anyway, there we are. Thank you for sitting through this very long and shambolic review, as usual. I'm sorry, I will try to get better at this, but can't teach a fucked dog new tricks. I think that's probably the term. Anyway, there we are. Thanks for watching, and cheerio. First arriving in Los Angeles, filled with the glitter and the glow of motherfuckery. Will Coldheart Canyon grab me by the short and curlies, or will it leave me literally with a cold heart, motherfucker? I'm wondering, or perhaps you're wondering, what I'll think of this one. Will it indeed... Fucking hell. So, a silent film actress, a fairly famous one at the time. I don't know if she existed in real life. I don't think so. Why am I talking about this then? And she's taken with her kind of... motherfucker. His ideas. I mean, the what we encounter... motherfucker. If the whole book were a great big cake... oh, fuck off. I'm terrible at this. Absolutely terrible. The only really stellar, shining... The apex. Fuck me, John. What is your problem? Now, the last thing I'll say that I absolutely loved, and what I've already kind of waxed upon... fuck me. There were other parts... Motherfuck. Yeah, it needed an edit, that's all, I think. No, fuck. Now, the first thing is, this book, as I've said already, is absolutely massive. It didn't need to be this big. Motherfucker. There was... I mean, let's get down to it. It just needed a damn good edit, that's all. I mean, early on, as soon as we were introduced to Todd Pickett, the pace just ground to a halt. Forward momentum, it was all gone. And there were scenes within this. There were whole chapters. I mean, one concerning his bloody pet dog, for example, that could have just been... I would have burnt that without any compulsion whatsoever. Gone. You're gone, mate. But there was lots of it that could have been pared down. But there we are. Too long. Oh, you fuck.